Hi everyone. Figured I'd do a video here this morning with the brake installation, I guess, or the rotor replacements on my Q50S Sport Hybrid. I don't know how many of you have this version of the car. It's a little bit different than the others. Over the years, I've had nothing but ongoing service needs for brake service on this car. I guess the combination of the hybrid brake regeneration system and the actual brakes, I guess power brakes, it creates a bit of a problem with wear. So I've seemed to go through a lot of brake pads, rotors, and I think I've only have about 2 years on these rotors and pads, and I'm getting pulsation again in the spring. This is now the fall, but in the spring I changed out or cleaned out the rotors that I had, polish them up, try to clear the glides. That's what I normally try to do at least twice a year. And unfortunately, I've got a lot of premature spalling and brake rotor, I guess, falling apart. I've spent some money on actually buying better, higher premium quality brake rotors, and this just doesn't seem to help. Anyway, I've got a new product line I'm going to give it a try, and I'll give you my review as I do the installation. So here I go, and I'll give you a few reviews and tips on how I'm doing this. So I've done 3 out of the 4 rotors at this point, and just give you a bit of an overview of what they look like. So here are the product lines. If you're looking for the model from DBC, I've got those are the front rotors. They look quite nice. They're coated, and these are the rear rotors. And these are the ones that just came off. You know, the actual hubs don't seem to have rusted, but I'm getting a lot of corrosion, and I'm not sure what the issue is, whether or not I've got air in the lines, I've tried to bleed them, or if it's just a matter of not putting enough pressure on the brake pads. The front ones, as you can see, have started to spall off. There's metal that's actually come off, and it's giving me pulsation as I'm braking. So that's the front right. I'm going to be replacing the front left, and this is the rotor here. Brake pads, certainly I've got lots of time left, lots of pad left, but unfortunately they're just not lasting. As far as rotors, I'm going to replace rotors and pads. Spend about $6.50 Canadian for the package here. As far as brake pads, there's a package of that they came in, and this is the last set. I'm going to try a little bit of anti-squeal brake cleaner, and I'm going to get going here. So got it up on the hoist, and we're going to give it a start. So here's a bit of a picture of what the brake, this front rotor is looking like for wear pattern. I guess I'm uneven wear, and I've tried to clean the glides basically 6 months ago, and we're back at a very uneven wear on these. So I'm going to replace this set of pads, and it's a pretty straightforward. It's basically 2 bolts, a couple pins, and it goes pretty quickly. So these brakes are pretty straightforward. These are the sport brakes. So they've got basically 4 pistons that run the system. So there's 2 front, 2 back, and they sit in a slide here. So we're going to pull the glides out first for us to remove the brake pad. So a pair of needle nose pliers, come in here, and we're going to pull out the pins. So pull that one out. And I've been using a lot of anti-seize and stuff, so a lot of this stuff comes apart pretty easy. I should be able to just take the needle nose pliers here and just push the pin back a bit. There, it went in. Remember, there's a nice polish or enamel coating on your brakes, so make sure you don't scratch paint. So then in the back here, we're going to pull these pins out. There's one. Again, there's a, you just pull right out. Just grab them on the collar. It's hard to do, of course, with one hand. There we go. And that's your there's a pressure plate that holds it down, and just stainless steel. It clips on through here and there for it to hold the brakes in place. So now we're gonna have to just spread the brake pads. I just use a pry tool. So I'm gonna use just a bit of a pry tool here. I come up and trying to find a spot just to pry get the brake to back off. And I'll do this a little bit more. So I'm going to use a pair of channel locks on the back side just to compress a little bit, just to get the caliper to start to move. You don't necessarily need to do that because I can get the slide, but I just figured I'd compress them this way. Again, we don't want to do it on the front side because again, there's an enamel finish on the brakes. So anyway, now I'm going to use my pry bar just to continue pressing them back. Again, I can push up against here to press and get the other one to move back. So anyway, I can finish compressing those pistons with a clamp mechanism. I know it's probably a little bit redneck this way, but it works, frees it up, and next is to remove two 21-inch metric bolts that hold the caliper in place. So I'm going to raise the car up so I can get to it from underneath. Alright, so I'm going to use this, I guess this torque bar, 21mm socket, and it goes up. There's two bolts that need to be done. There's this one and that one up here, and all we need to do is take those off, and it'll release the caliper from the knuckle, and then we'll just I guess so I'll loosen them up right now with the torque bar. And I'm the one that put on last time, so there it goes. Pretty straightforward, nice and easy. Simple enough. Nope. Now, not sure about other people, but every time I do work on a car, I use anti-seize on my bolts, so it makes it easier to loosen and tighten bolts up. So anyway, those two are now loosened up, and I can use a different wrench. Just a half-inch socket wrench, and you might have been able to do this with your standard wrenches as well, but I find it easier just get the things to free up. So in order to get this caliper up, I'm going to have to hang it. So I'm just use a piece of heavy wire that I'm going to use, and in order to free up the caliper, the brake line here is going to have to come free. In order for, because it is a hard connection, I guess you can't see that. to the back of the caliper. So I'm just going to spray that with some WD-40 just to give it a little bit of help. And let's see, we're going to use a pry tool to just pry that off. So I'm just going to, again, be careful of your brakes. You want to basically remove this I'm going to lift that up, and I'm just going to, it's hard to do it with one hand, so I'm going to use two just to make sure I don't damage the brake line here. All right. So here I'm going to go in here. Just pry it up. There we go. So that's now free. Let's put this away over here. Put my pry bar away. And this will free up in here. So when you, there we go. So there. So that's going to be free. So the next part is to remove the bolts. I've loosened them underneath. So there should be just take them out by hand. Again, 21mm bolt, lots of thread. So there you see, I've got some anti-seize on there already from the last time I did this, so it makes it easier to remove. And I got to do the same thing with the back one here. Put my hand up against the caliper in case it wants to slide. I'm on the camera. There we go. So, I got my hand on this. Again, be very careful with your finish on your calipers. We want to get this off. And in order to do that, we need to get the brake line to free up on the side there. See there, I have to free up there, and I'm just gonna loop the wire through here and hang it up. Okay. So yeah, so I've got it strung through. Be careful you don't scratch your caliper. And then these, the brake pads will just pull out. Again, there's two of them. They'll just slide right out. I'm going to put them aside. And at this point, the rotor's free. Should be able to just pull right off. Okay. So take a look at the back of this bad boy as well. Again, it's not bad, but it's very rough. So anyway, let's hope these new ones perform better. I was getting some braking in here. The hybrid cars, of course, they use the induction, so the brakes don't work as hard, and I think that they're probably prone to premature wear or through lack of use and pressure, especially on the sport model. I like to take the rust off of the hub, so I'm going to take my drill, my wire brush, and clean that out just to make it nice and smooth so that the new rotor sits flat. I like to use a wire brush attachment on a drill, and I'm just going to come in here and just basically take all the rust off of there if there's any buildup, so that the hub can, or the brake drum can sit flat up against the hub. So here we go. So I've polished that up with my Milwaukee drill and a wire brush. It looks like this hub I replaced. It's a 2014. I replaced the hub in 2017 on this car. It was worn, and so anyway, I painted it. I guess some of the paint's still there. It's in pretty good shape. The other thing is the glides where these things sit in. You can see it's getting pretty. These touch points need to be cleaned up. So what we're going to do now is just going to use some brake cleaner and polish. The pistons have pushed back pretty well, so they're. I might do just a little bit more just to make sure that they're pushed back. The purists would probably get you to bleed this, so there's a bleeders here and here. Perhaps I should be doing that, but I only am here by myself, and I don't have somebody help me with bleeding the lines. I do have a kit that can do it. So anyway, we'll see how the brakes feel afterwards. It certainly would be welcome some comments from those that have this car and are servicing it as far as the brakes, because I certainly have had lots of grief with this car. As far as service-wise, brakes stop fine, but I think it's just very much a high-maintenance item for this car. So just to make sure that the pistons are all the way back, I've been cleaning it. I use the old brake pad, grab one of these quick grip clamps, and I'm going to push back both pistons. I've been cleaning the glides out with brake cleaner. So what we do is just take this and just squeeze it so that I compress it as much as I can. So I've got that one done. Oops, hard to do with one hand. So then I'm going to just push them all back just to make sure that the pistons have actually bottomed out. Not sure if that's a good idea, but I'd like to make sure that they do get flat. And certainly they'll push the other side open. And again, sometimes you can get them just to work back. So I'm going to work progressively at compressing both set of pistons back in, just to make sure that I've got the full range of motion in them. I know that if there's dirt in there, it's not a good thing. It's pushing it back into the system. But I've been doing it for years and haven't had a problem. Maybe that's part of my problem. I've flushed the brake lines. They're pretty clean at this point. So I used the second brake pad. Got a rubber block here, and just basically you can use this to just basically pry between the two of them to get them to seat. That's what I did. So that way they've got both pistons to bottom out. Hopefully that'll help with their travel, range of travel. If there's any edges or whatever, it'll work a little bit, maybe a little bit smoother. All right. I think it's really important to get those contact points cleaned out where the brakes will slide or contact against. They're supposed to be free. I've cleaned them with brake cleaner. You can see a little bit of rust on the surface of where the brake pads sit. So this is where I'm going to use anti-seize and some anti-squeak on the brake pads. So it just gives you a bit of a sense of some of the challenges with this set of brakes. Are pretty straightforward, but they need to be able to move freely. And so anyway, I'm going to add some anti-seize and start the assembly. So I'm going to try something new this time around. I'm going to try some of this Permatex disc brake quiet. So I'm going to put some of this on the back of the brake pads. And they say put a thin coat. Maybe it's too much. It's my first time using this stuff. And what I'm going to do is just put it on the back side. I think it's supposed to help with brake chatter. And so I'm going to just apply a coating on the back side. I never really had a problem with brake chatter with my car, but anyway. And I've sometimes left the stainless steel shims. Last time I didn't use them, seemed to be fine. So I'm going to give this a try, see what that's like. And so give this a chance to dry as I start putting the assembly of everything else on. This is a chance to provide a bit of a coating. And so anyway, we'll see how this progresses. So I've got the anti-seize from, I guess, Permatex as well. I've used both the zinc and the copper. I like the way the copper stays soft. It's a little bit more money, but I'm going to give it a try. Putting it on the glide locations. So what I generally do is I apply a coating to where the brakes are going to glide through. So I'm just going to apply these on all the touch points to make sure that I'm going to put a little bit of on all. There's each pad only touches these points here. So I'm just going to apply the coating to those points alone where the brakes actually, where the brakes actually touch. So I'm going to get some more coating and see how that goes. Now, one of the things that sometimes can be a problem with these is that if you put an application on the edges, you could touch the rotor. So what I do is I'll just come in with a rag from the back side and just make sure that there's nothing going to come up against the back of the rotor. So to clean all the back sides. There's no touch points between any of the lubricant or anti-seize and the actual friction points. Clean that up, but also I'm going to put some anti-seize into the pin glides, just so that I can remove them a little bit easier the next time. And with the brake rotor, I also like to just put a little bit of anti-seize on there. Just put a little bit, so I can get it apart next time. And just put a very, very thin coat along the edges here, so that I don't want it to create a thickness that it won't bond or seat properly on the hub. But I also want to be able to get it apart. Now these rotors are coated. This might be all academic, but if you've got straight steel, I know that there's been times where I'm trying to get rotors off of hubs and they just won't come off, and you can avoid all of that if you're doing your own work. Just add a little bit of anti-seize, or I guess there's some high temperature grease if you want to just prevent it from corroding. Here in Canada, our winters are pretty brutal with salt, and if you want to get stuff apart in a couple of years, a little bit of work ahead in advance certainly makes life a little bit easier in the future. So I'm not sure if there's, usually they put an oil protector on it. So again, use your brake cleaner. I'm not sure how much you guys like to use. Stuff's expensive, so I use a clean rag. Back side of it is really hard to get to after the fact, so I like to clean the front or the behind before I put it back up onto the hub. Yeah, so I put a little bit of anti-seize on this as well, just to keep it from rusting. And let's put this baby on and see if I can do it with one hand. Easy enough, fits on, got a few fingerprints on it. We'll just clean that off with some brake cleaner. So anyway, just always make sure that with your brake line that that you make sure that it doesn't get kinked or broken, because it is very it is flexible, but it only has a limit. I add a little bit of anti-seize to the end here just because of the way it sits inside of this. See it side of this bracket, right? It's kind of got to lock in, so it's just a matter of making sure it's clean. It's going to corrode in there. Again, Canadian salt in the winter corrodes things apart. You know, if you had to remove it before, I think I removed the 2 bolts that retain it on top of the control arm, but it's not quite necessary. All right, so we're going to put this the caliper back on. I've untied it. Watch your line. Put the bolts in the bottom so they're ready to go. They're ready on the connection. So just bottom line is just to get this thing back in alignment. You got to make sure that you put this through first, so your brake line is going to go in the right spot, and then just come down. You can feel it come in to the right spot, and then with the second hand I'm just going to tighten those 2 bolts. So it's just a matter of getting this clip in here. So this clip just sits in here like this, and you've got it in the right spot. Should slide down. A lot of times just needs a little bit of persuasion. There's a little bit of tapping. Use my right hand here. There it is. It's sitting in place. So that's now the brake line's back and secure. So as I'm going to put the brakes back in, I'm going to use some brake lubricant. Now the contact point on the brakes and the calipers are just these little pieces here on both sides. So what a lot of times I'll do is I'll put either anti-seize or some silicone. So I'm going to use this silicone based brake lubricant that again, Permatex. It's pretty useful, and I'm going to just apply a little bit along where the glide piece is. So what I'll do is, because I can't use both hands, I'm going to just stop this for a second. So yeah, so we're going to put a little bit of lubricant to the top of these glides, and try to not foul up the contact points here. So yeah, just put a little bit of grease on where the contact points are. Make sure not to touch the pads on both sides. So we're ready to put them into the rotor here. So here, I'll do that next piece. So let's put them in. They just basically slide in. And that's one. Shouldn't touch the glides, and the face. Make sure you're clean. They just slide right in. And just make sure that yeah, you go in just deep enough for those glides to go through. The next step is to reinstall this baby here. You can clean it off. Again, it provides you with the spring to hold them down. It's made of stainless steel. So these will go in, and then I got to put my pins in next. All right. So I'm going to slide those through. Now if you've got pins that are really rusty like I do, what I'll do is I'll just use a wire brush and take the rust off of them, so polish them off so that I get them all cleaned up. And then I'm going to put some anti-seize on these so that the glides get rid of the loose rust, makes it easier to reassemble. You probably noticed I turned the steering wheel, or turned the wheel on the car So it makes it a little easier to get to the end of this. When you're putting your pins, make sure your little pivot, their pin points, your lock pins are upwards, so that makes it easier to put in or put your pins in. So again, I'm going to start off with trying to get the brake pad. There we go. So get them into the brakes. That hard to do all this stuff one-handed, but should be able to. And my pin is straight up, so that it just makes it a little bit easier for me to get it to come through. Again, it's brake pad needs to move up and down. There we go. It's through, and all we need then is to grab our pins and see it's engaged, and to make sure it seats at the bottom. And we'll do the other one here. And make sure that the pin is upwards, so that it makes it easier for me to probably pull up. There, it's in. Grab my other pin. And this brake kit comes with new pins. My old ones seem to be in pretty good shape. They're not rusty or deformed, so I'm just going to continue reusing them with my existing pins. And making sure that it's moving up and down the pins, so I've got it in properly. Okay. In. It's in. So there the brakes are on, and we're going to have to torque up those two bolts. That one there and this one here are still loose. I got to tighten them up. So that's the next step. So we've got the rotor on, and the calipers tightened up, and it's ready to put the wheels on. So hopefully you've learned a little bit from this. Make it easier if you turn your wheels to get to the glides. And also remember, as before you start to move it, pump your brakes, because of course if you've lost all your I guess the gap, so it's going to take a few strokes for it to engage. So anyway, hopefully the brakes work properly at this point, and I'll give you an update if anything else develops. And feel free to add comments below. Thanks everyone.